More now on the legal problems, both criminal and civil, that the president finds himself and those close to him enrolled in. For that, we turn to Trent Copeland, criminal defense attorney and legal analyst. He joins us here on set, and it's always great having him with us. What's your key takeaway from the leaked list of questions?
Well, first of all, that they were leaked, right, Larry? The fact that these presumably came from the special counsel, the truth is they didn't. And I don't think anyone who presupposes that these were questions that came directly from the special counsel, they're not being honest with themselves. These were the summaries of questions that I'm certain that Mueller's team gave verbally to Trump's team, and Trump's team decided to leak these questions for a couple of reasons. One, they could label the special counsel as being leakers. That's important to them. They could essentially get public sentiment for those people who are behind Trump to say, hey, look, these are overbroad questions. These questions deal with issues that don't relate to anything that the special counsel should have been investigating. There's no collusion. So all of those things were the reasons why these questions were leaked. And I think the most important takeaway from it is that these questions zero in on Trump's state of mind. These questions, they don't hint around the bush. What they do is they zero in on Trump's state of mind. They want to know what he knew about Russia and collusion. They want to know what he knew about Paul Manafort reaching out to Russia. They want to know why he fired James Comey. These are questions that directly go to his state of mind, and I think Trump feels the heat as a result of these questions.
So the nature of them is, in summary.
It's a summary. I think, look, lawyers don't ask questions like this, Larry, and you know this as better as anyone. Lawyers don't ask these open-ended questions. And the truth is, everyone knows that if you're going to get an audience with the president, if Mueller is going to get an audience with the president and have him sit down for an interview, there are going to be strict time constraints. He's not going to ask an open-ended question that's going to allow Trump to just, filibuster his way through an hour or two. He's going to ask specific questions, narrowly tailored, specifically zeroing in on specific issues. So there's no way that these questions were the actual ones.
Yeah, there'll be questions like did.
Should.
Not why.
Not why.
The Mueller team, it made no sense. Why could Mueller make a statement that we didn't send those questions over?
I think he could, but I think the general sense
Why does
is
Mueller never speak?
Mueller's team, Larry, that's a very good question. Mueller's team has really been hermetically sealed, right? They don't leak, they don't speak, they're not seeking public support and sentiment for what they're doing. They just go about their business, head down, doing their work. And I think that's the way he wants to be. Remember, Mueller has been involved in government for many, many years. Headed up the FBI.
I interviewed him twice.
He knows you well. The fact of the matter is, this is someone, Larry, who's going to keep his head down. He's going to continue this investigation, and he's not going to play the game that Trump plays, and that is that he's going to tweet, that he's going to somehow issue public statements, denying. He's simply going to continue to do his work.
Do you think Trump would ever fire him and Rosenstein?
Sure I do. I don't know that he will, but I think he's certainly anticipated firing them, particularly earlier on in the investigation. I think he had to be talked down from that from his lawyer, John Dowd. But would he consider firing them? Absolutely he would. But I think at this point, there's been such critical mass, there's been such momentum moving towards whether or not he's going to sit down with Mueller, I think it would be really politically difficult for him to fire.
Look, he was going to, as soon as the audit was over, he was going to release his tax returns. He has previously said he can't wait to sit down with Mueller. Is that baloney?
Look, Larry, look, I think, the truth is in the pudding, right? He says he's going to release his tax returns. We're now 3 years past him releasing the last 3 years of tax returns. He hasn't. Says he's looking forward to sitting down with Mueller, but he's doing everything in his power to avoid doing that. You can't believe him. So the truth is, his supporters and anyone who's behind Trump believes Trump at the moment he says what he's saying at that moment.
You think you might subpoena Mueller? Mueller might subpoena Trump?
I think he will almost certainly subpoena Trump if Trump does not voluntarily to sit down to him. And look, there's been a lot of discussion, Larry, about, there are the only two options. Is he going to sit down voluntarily with Mueller, or is he going to be subpoenaed, in which case he'll be forced to? I think there's a third door that people aren't talking about. The third door is that he simply says, listen, I'm going to assert executive privilege. I'm going to say, listen, you don't, Mueller, have the authority to force me to sit down for an interview because you're going to ask me questions that relate to my specific duties as a president under Article 2. And under Article 2, under the executive branch of which I am the head, I don't have to answer these questions. Now, that could create a constitutional crisis where that issue goes up to the Supreme Court, and he doesn't assert the Fifth, nor does he agree to voluntarily sit down.
Interesting. Did Nixon or Clinton ever do that?
Nixon did assert executive privilege, Larry, but he asserted executive privilege related to whether or not he was going to produce tapes. He was never subpoenaed to testify in front of a grand jury, and that's different. This would be a case of first impression, so we don't know what the Supreme Court would do in that instance.
Is there any reward to Trump to sit down?
You know, that's a great question, Larry, and I think scholars will debate that for years. Is there a reward? Certainly, but there's a risk, and the risk-reward is, if he sits down, he could say things that could be directly incriminating. The reward is that he says, hey, look, I chose to sit down. I told you all along I had nothing to fear. I had nothing to hide, and I chose to sit down. But I think the risk-reward is far weighted more heavily in the risk, and I don't think that his lawyers will allow him to sit down. If I'm his lawyer, I'm standing in front of the door, I'm blocking him, I'm saying, you're not sitting down with this special prosecutor over my dead body.
He could plead, the president could plead the Fifth too, couldn't he?
Sure, he could plead the Fifth, and that's certainly what
But that would be
prerogative.
almost, because he has knocked people who have pleaded the Fifth, right?
That'd be historical. He'd be the first president who's ever pled the Fifth. He's also going to hear a running monologue in the background of him saying, who pleads the Fifth? Only mobsters plead the Fifth. I'm not pleading the Fifth. Now, look, again, he's defied the laws of political gravity, Larry, in more ways and in more instances than one. And so if he decides to take an about face and decides to plead the Fifth, he may use that as political campaign fodder and simply say, hey, look, I'm pleading the Fifth because I'm not going to engage in this process. I don't believe in Bob Mueller and this team. I think this is a complete setup. So I'm pleading the Fifth, and I'm not doing so because I think I'm guilty. I'm doing it because I simply don't want to be involved in the process.
Couldn't he go to the American people and say, folks, I can't be president with this hanging around me. I'm trying to do things. I'm trying North Korea. I'm trying to settle things, and this is hampering me.
And it probably is hampering him, Larry. That's a good question. In reality, this probably is such a distraction for the president that he really can't focus on much else. And look, we've heard there are rumors coming out of the White House that he's completely obsessed with it, that he's not focused, that he's got a big North Korean summit coming up, and he can't focus on it. And of course, he can go to the American people and say, listen, I'm reaching the conclusion that I've got to end this investigation. I've got to cut it off so I can go back to doing the business of the American people.
And so I'm firing both of them.
And so I'm firing both of them. That could happen.
Trent, always great.
My pleasure, Larry.